Welcome back to JSILBee.com. In this video, we're going to explore step by step. By the end of this lesson, you'll clearly understand and be able to apply it in real situations. Let's dive in.
JSILBee presents Civil Rights presented by Dr. Jonas Sanders.
Hey there, today we are going to study about civil rights. Module 1.to Civil Rights Introduction Description. As we begin this journey into the world of civil rights, it is important to understand not only what civil rights are, but also why they have been central to the development of democratic societies across history. In this first module, I aim to introduce the foundational concepts and provide a historical backdrop that will serve as a framework for the rest of the course. By reflecting on key documents and moments that have shaped civil rights globally, we will better appreciate their role in shaping modern democracies. Defining civil rights vs. privileges. One of the core aspects of civil rights is the distinction between rights and privileges. Civil rights are often misunderstood as privileges or benefits that are granted by the government. However, the essence of civil rights lies in their universality and inalienability. A right is something to which an individual is inherently entitled by virtue of being human, whereas privileges are special advantages that can be granted or revoked. In this section, I'll break down the differences, highlighting why civil rights are protected across legal systems and how they set the foundation for human dignity and equality. Historical context, the origin of civil rights concepts. To fully grasp the modern conception of civil rights, it's essential to examine their historical roots. I'll take you through the evolution of civil rights, beginning with early philosophical ideas in the writings of figures like John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. These thinkers advocated for natural rights, those rights that individuals possess inherently, independent of the government. Their ideas laid the groundwork for movements that called for freedom, equality, and justice. From there, I'll explore how these early ideas influenced revolutionary documents such as the Magna Carta and the U.S. Declaration of Independence, which were pivotal in articulating individual rights against oppressive governance. As we look into the Enlightenment era and the rise of nation-states, we will see how civil rights developed as integral elements of modern legal systems and political theory. Key documents: U.S. Bill of Rights and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Civil rights have been enshrined in significant documents throughout history, serving as cornerstones for legal protections. Two such documents stand out: the U.S. Bill of Rights and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR. The U.S. Bill of Rights, adopted in 1791, is one of the earliest examples of civil liberties being codified in a national constitution. It guarantees fundamental freedoms such as speech, religion, and the press, which have become benchmarks in civil rights discussions globally. On the international front, the UDHR, adopted by the United Nations in 1948, represents a milestone in human rights law. For the first time, civil rights were proclaimed as universal, transcending national boundaries. I'll analyze both documents, discussing their significance and enduring impact in shaping modern democratic societies. The role of civil rights in modern democracies. Finally, I'll bring the discussion to the present, examining the ongoing role of civil rights in shaping democratic governance. Civil rights are not static; they have evolved and continue to adapt as societies change. In modern democracies, civil rights underpin the rule of law, ensuring that individuals are treated equally before the law and that government actions are held accountable. From voting rights and anti-discrimination laws to freedom of expression, civil rights empower citizens to participate fully in the political and social fabric of their countries. We will explore key examples where civil rights are at the forefront of current political debates, from racial justice movements to LGBTQ rights, and discuss how these movements draw upon historical civil rights struggles. Ultimately, this section will highlight how civil rights serve as the bedrock of democratic societies and remain vital for protecting individual freedoms today. In summary, this module aims to establish a clear and detailed understanding of civil rights, their origins, their evolution, and their critical role in modern governance. Through this exploration, I hope we can appreciate how civil rights continue to shape the world we live in. Module 2: Slavery and the Abolition Movement. Description. As colorfire. In this module, we delve into one of the most challenging and transformative periods in history, the institution of slavery and the subsequent abolition movement. By understanding the depth of human suffering under slavery and the tremendous efforts to abolish it, we can better comprehend how modern civil rights were forged in the crucible of this intense struggle. I aim to guide you through the historical context, introduce you to the key figures who led the fight against slavery, and explore the legislative milestones that helped shape a new era of freedom and justice. History of slavery in the U.S. and other regions. The story of slavery is not unique to the United States, but the scale and impact of slavery in the U.S. provide a crucial lens through which we examine its global legacy. Slavery, rooted in ancient practices, became intricately linked to economic systems, particularly through the transatlantic slave trade. In the U.S., slavery became entrenched in the South's economy, primarily to support agricultural demands such as cotton and tobacco production. This section will trace the development of slavery from its origins to its establishment in the U.S. We will explore how the U.S. became a central player in the global slave trade, and I will draw comparisons with other regions, including the Caribbean and Latin America, where slavery was also practiced on a large scale. Understanding the scope and inhumanity of slavery, including the dehumanization of enslaved people and the generational impact on African Americans, sets the stage for the emergence of the abolition movement. Key figures: Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth. The fight against slavery was fueled by remarkable individuals who risked everything to challenge this brutal institution. Among these figures, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, and Sojourner Truth stand out as iconic leaders whose contributions resonate through history. Frederick Douglass, a formerly enslaved man, became one of the most powerful voices for abolition. His writings and speeches, including his autobiography, gave the world first-hand accounts of the horrors of slavery and called for immediate emancipation. Douglass's ability to articulate the moral and political arguments against slavery inspired many to join the abolitionist cause. Harriet Tubman's heroism in leading enslaved people to freedom through the Underground Railroad is legendary. Her courage, determination, and tactical brilliance as a conductor of the Underground Railroad freed dozens of enslaved people and made her a symbol of resistance against oppression. Sojourner Truth, a powerful orator and advocate for both abolition and women's rights, challenged societal norms with her famous Ain't I a Woman speech. Truth's life and activism intersected with both the abolitionist and early feminist movements, making her a trailblazer in both causes. In this section, I will provide a deeper look into their lives, their motivations, and the lasting impact of their work on American society and the broader human rights movements. The abolitionist movement and its impact. The abolitionist movement was a widespread and often dangerous effort to dismantle the institution of slavery. Comprised of both black and white Americans, the movement gained traction in the early 19th century, employing moral, legal, and political strategies to challenge the legality and morality of slavery. I will explore the different facets of the abolitionist movement. From the radical abolitionists who called for immediate emancipation to more moderate voices who advocated for gradual reforms. Organizations such as the American Anti-Slavery Society played a critical role in mobilizing public opinion against slavery, using literature, speeches, and political lobbying to shift the national conversation. The abolitionist movement's impact was profound, creating a cultural shift that eventually led to the Civil War and the end of legalized slavery. In this section, I will also discuss the limitations of the movement, including the intense backlash it faced from pro-slavery factions and how those tensions contributed to the eruption of civil conflict. The Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment. The culmination of the abolitionist movement came through two pivotal legal milestones: the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 and the 13th Amendment in 1865. Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation marked a turning point in the Civil War, declaring that enslaved people in the Confederate States were to be freed. While limited in scope since it applied only to states in rebellion, the proclamation symbolized a federal commitment to ending slavery. The 13th Amendment, ratified in 1865, legally abolished slavery throughout the United States. I will examine the political and social circumstances surrounding these landmark decisions, as well as the profound effects they had on the U.S. and its people. The end of slavery marked the beginning of a long and ongoing struggle for racial equality, a theme that will recur throughout this course. In conclusion, this module provides an in-depth exploration of slavery and the abolitionist movement, setting the stage for later discussions about civil rights and justice. By understanding the legacy of slavery and the efforts to dismantle it, we gain essential insights into the continuous struggle for human rights and dignity. Module 3. Reconstruction and Jim Crow Laws. Description. As we move forward in our exploration of civil rights, we now enter the period following the abolition of slavery, a time that was both promising and devastating for African Americans. The Reconstruction era was a moment of potential transformation, but it was followed by the rise of legalized segregation and increased racial violence. In this module, I will guide you through the Reconstruction era's initial gains, the backlash that ensued, and the oppressive legal framework of Jim Crow, which set the stage for systemic racism in the U.S. for generations. Reconstruction era 1865 to 1877 gains and setbacks. The Reconstruction era, beginning in 1865 and lasting until 1877, was a critical moment in U.S. history. After the Civil War and the abolition of slavery, the country faced the immense challenge of integrating newly freed African Americans into society as full citizens. The era saw significant strides toward racial equality, particularly with the passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. These constitutional amendments abolished slavery, granted citizenship to all persons born or naturalized in the U.S., and ensured voting rights regardless of race. During Reconstruction, African Americans experienced unprecedented political participation. Many served in local, state, and even federal offices, including the election of the first black members of Congress. However, this period was also marked by severe resistance from Southern whites, leading to a range of setbacks. White supremacist ideologies gained traction, and federal support for Reconstruction efforts began to wane, leading to a gradual erosion of the gains made by African Americans. Black codes and Jim Crow laws institutionalized segregation. As Reconstruction ended in 1877, Southern states quickly moved to enact laws that would suppress the rights of African Americans. The Black Codes were an early form of these laws designed to restrict the freedom of black individuals and force them into exploitative labor arrangements reminiscent of slavery. These codes set the groundwork for what would later become known as Jim Crow laws. The Jim Crow era, which lasted from the late 19th century until the mid-20th century, institutionalized racial segregation in nearly every aspect of life. Through a combination of state and local laws, African Americans were relegated to second-class citizenship. Public spaces, schools, transportation, and even voting rights were segregated, creating a deeply unequal society that was legally sanctioned. I will explore how these laws reinforced white dominance and systematically oppressed black Americans. The legal framework of Jim Crow not only denied African Americans basic civil rights, but also laid the foundation for the systemic racism that persists in various forms today. The rise of white supremacist groups KKK, etc. One of the darkest legacies of the Reconstruction era was the rise of violent white supremacist groups, most notably the Ku Klux Klan KKK. These groups emerged in response to the gains made by African Americans during Reconstruction and aimed to terrorize black communities and their allies. Using intimidation, violence, and murder, the KKK sought to restore white dominance and prevent African Americans from exercising their newfound rights. In this section, I will examine the origins and tactics of the KKK and similar groups, as well as the role they played in reinforcing the Jim Crow system. These groups operated with impunity, often receiving tacit support from local authorities and politicians. Their activities had a chilling effect on African American communities, stifling political participation and perpetuating a culture of fear and oppression. Impact on African American communities. The combined effects of Jim Crow laws, white supremacist violence, and the failure of Reconstruction profoundly impacted African American communities. The hope and promise of freedom and equality after the Civil War gave way to a harsh reality of segregation, economic disenfranchisement, and systemic racism. Despite these challenges, African American communities found ways to resist and survive. I will explore the resilience and resistance of African Americans during this period, focusing on the development of black institutions such as schools, churches, and businesses. These institutions became vital centers of support, education, and political activism, providing a foundation for future civil rights movements. In summary, this module will cover how the Reconstruction era's promise of equality was undermined by legal and extra-legal means, resulting in the entrenchment of segregation and racial violence under Jim Crow. By understanding this historical period, we can better grasp the long-lasting effects of institutionalized racism and the ongoing struggle for civil rights in America. Module 4. The Civil Rights Movement of the 20th Century. Description. In this module, we will explore one of the most pivotal periods in American history, the Civil Rights Movement of the 20th century. This movement was marked by extraordinary courage and resilience as African Americans and their allies fought to dismantle systemic racism and secure equal rights. Through key events, influential leaders, dedicated organizations, and differing philosophies of resistance, I aim to provide a comprehensive understanding of the movement's evolution and its enduring impact on American society. Key events: Montgomery bus boycott, March on Washington, Selma. The civil rights movement was defined by a series of key events that galvanized public opinion and advanced the cause of racial equality. One of the most significant was the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955, sparked by Rosa Parks' courageous refusal to give up her seat to a white man. This year-long boycott of the city's bus system showcased the power of collective action and nonviolent protest, ultimately leading to a Supreme Court ruling that declared segregation on public buses unconstitutional. Another landmark moment was the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in 1963, where over 250,000 people gathered to demand civil and economic rights for African Americans. This event is perhaps best remembered for Martin Luther King Jr.'s iconic "I Have a Dream" speech, which articulated a vision of racial harmony and justice. It was a defining moment that brought national attention to the civil rights struggle and solidified King's role as a leading figure in the movement. The Selma to Montgomery marches in 1965 further exemplified the struggle for voting rights. These marches met with violent resistance from law enforcement, highlighted the dangers faced by those seeking equality, and ultimately led to the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. I will delve into the significance of these events and how they shaped the trajectory of the civil rights movement. Major leaders Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Rosa Parks. The civil rights movement was characterized by the leadership of remarkable individuals whose philosophies and approaches varied widely. Martin Luther King Jr. emerged as a symbol of nonviolent resistance and moral authority, advocating for peaceful protests and civil disobedience. His commitment to nonviolence was rooted in his Christian beliefs and the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi. Malcolm X, in contrast, represented a more militant approach to the struggle for Black empowerment. Initially a prominent figure in the Nation of Islam, he emphasized self-defense, racial pride, and economic independence for African Americans. His views evolved over time, particularly after his pilgrimage to Mecca, where he began to embrace a broader understanding of human rights. Rosa Parks, often referred to as the mother of the civil rights movement, played a crucial role in catalyzing activism through her act of defiance on the bus in Montgomery. Her commitment to justice and equality inspired countless others to join the movement. In this section, I will analyze how these leaders' differing philosophies contributed to the multifaceted nature of the movement and engaged a diverse array of supporters. Organizations: NAACP, SCCLC, SNCC Core. Numerous organizations were instrumental in the civil rights movement, each contributing unique strategies and perspectives. The NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, founded in 1909, focused on legal challenges to segregation and discrimination, achieving significant victories in the courts, including the landmark Brown v. Board of Education decision. The SCLC, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, co-founded by King, emphasized nonviolent direct action and mobilization of faith communities. The SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, was vital in engaging younger activists and grassroots organizing, particularly in voter registration drives in the South. The Core Congress of Racial Equality played a significant role in organizing events such as Freedom Rides, which challenged segregation in interstate travel. I will examine how these organizations complemented one another and the collective impact they had on the movement. Nonviolent resistance vs. Black Power movement. A defining tension within the civil rights movement was the debate between nonviolent resistance and the Black Power movement. Nonviolent resistance, championed by King and others, sought to achieve change through peaceful protests and moral persuasion. This approach garnered widespread sympathy and support, often highlighting the brutal realities of racial oppression. In contrast, the Black Power movement, which gained momentum in the 1960s, called for self-determination, cultural pride, and in some cases armed self-defense. Leaders like Stokely Carmichael and Huey P. Newton articulated a vision that emphasized the need for systemic change and empowerment of Black communities. In this section, I will explore how these differing philosophies shaped the movement, their implications for African American identity, and their lasting influence on subsequent social justice efforts. In summary, this module will provide an in-depth examination of the civil rights movement of the 20th century, highlighting key events, influential leaders, vital organizations, and the philosophical debates that define the struggle for racial equality. Understanding this transformative period is crucial for comprehending the ongoing fight for civil rights today. Module 5. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Description. Brea. In this module, we examine two of the most significant pieces of legislation in U.S. history: the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. These laws fundamentally transformed American society, dismantling institutionalized segregation and protecting the voting rights of African Americans. Through an analysis of their key provisions, major legal battles, and the role of the Supreme Court, I will provide a detailed understanding of how these acts reshaped the nation's legal and political landscape. The Civil Rights Act: key provisions and impact on segregation. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was a landmark law that addressed the systemic inequality and racial segregation that had permeated American life for decades. One of its most important provisions was Title II, which outlawed segregation in public accommodations, including restaurants, theaters, and hotels. This provision effectively dismantled the separate but equal doctrine established by Plessy v. Ferguson in 1896. Another critical component, Title VII, prohibited employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. The passage of the Civil Rights Act marked the beginning of the end for legalized segregation, but its enforcement was met with significant resistance, particularly in the South. Through this section, I will explore how the act was implemented and how it paved the way for further progress in the fight for racial equality, despite ongoing opposition. The Voting Rights Act ending disenfranchisement. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was a direct response to the widespread disenfranchisement of African Americans, particularly in the southern states. Before the act's passage, discriminatory practices like literacy tests, poll taxes, and other obstacles were used to prevent black citizens from exercising their right to vote. The Voting Rights Act targeted these barriers by prohibiting racial discrimination in voting practices and establishing federal oversight in areas with a history of voter suppression. Sections like Section 5, which required certain jurisdictions to obtain federal approval before changing voting laws, were vital in protecting the rights of African American voters. I will delve into the immediate and long-term impact of the Voting Rights Act, which significantly increased voter participation among African Americans and transformed the political landscape of the South. However, I will also consider the ongoing challenges to voting rights that have emerged in recent decades. Legal battles: Brown v. Board of Education, Loving v. Virginia. The fight for civil rights was not won by legislation alone. It was also shaped by critical Supreme Court decisions that laid the groundwork for the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Acts. The 1954 decision in Brown v. Board of Education declared state laws establishing separate public schools for black and white students unconstitutional, effectively overturning Plessy v. Ferguson. Brown was a major victory for the NAACP and a catalyst for the broader civil rights movement. Another key legal battle was Loving v. Virginia 1967, which struck down state laws banning interracial marriage. This ruling affirmed the basic civil rights of individuals to marry whomever they chose, regardless of race, further dismantling institutionalized racism. In this section, I will discuss these landmark cases and how they helped build the legal foundation for the civil rights reforms of the 1960s. These cases highlight the critical role the judiciary played in the advancement of civil rights. The role of the Supreme Court and federal enforcement. The role of the Supreme Court and federal enforcement in civil rights cannot be understated. While the Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act were crucial legislative victories, their effectiveness depended on the enforcement actions taken by the federal government and the willingness of the Supreme Court to uphold and expand civil rights protections. Through cases like Heart of Atlanta Motel v. United States, which upheld the constitutionality of the Civil Rights Act, and Shelby County v. Holder, which significantly weakened the Voting Rights Act's protections, I will explore how the court's decisions have shaped the civil rights landscape. In conclusion, this module will provide an in-depth look at the legal milestones of the civil rights movement, emphasizing the significance of the Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act and the ongoing challenges in securing true racial equality. Understanding these developments is essential to grasping the complexities of civil rights in modern America. Module 6. Women's Rights in the Fight for Gender Equality. Description. In this module, we turn our attention to the enduring struggle for gender equality, a movement that has transformed societies across the globe. Women's rights have been central to the broader civil rights movement, and understanding the evolution of gender equality efforts provides critical insight into the legal, political, and social shifts of the 20th century and beyond. Through key historical milestones, the feminist movement, and groundbreaking legislation, we will explore the progress made and the challenges that remain in the pursuit of gender justice. The suffrage movement and the 19th Amendment. The fight for women's suffrage, one of the earliest and most defining moments in the struggle for gender equality, culminated in the passage of the 19th Amendment in 1920, granting women the right to vote in the United States. This victory was the result of decades of activism led by figures such as Susan B., Anthony Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and countless others who demanded that women be recognized as full citizens. However, the suffrage movement was not without its limitations. While the 19th Amendment marked a significant step toward equality, many women of color, particularly African American and Native American women, continued to face barriers to voting. In this section, I will explore both the triumphs and the limitations of the suffrage movement and its role in laying the foundation for future gender equality efforts. Intersectionality, race, and gender in civil rights struggles. The concept of intersectionality, introduced by scholar Kimbrough Crenshaw, is crucial to understanding the interconnected nature of social justice movements. As intersectionality examines how overlapping identities, such as race, gender, and class, shape an individual's experience of oppression and privilege. In the fight for gender equality, race has always been a significant factor. African American women, Native women, and Latinas have faced unique challenges within both the civil rights and women's rights movements. Leaders like Sojourner Truth, Ida B. Wells and Audre Lorde advocated for both racial and gender equality, reminding us that the struggle for women's rights cannot be separated from the larger fight for racial justice. I will explore how intersectionality has shaped the history of women's rights and continues to influence feminist discourse today. The feminist movements of the 20th century. The feminist movements of the 20th century can be divided into distinct waves, each addressing different aspects of gender inequality. First wave feminism focused primarily on legal rights, such as suffrage and property rights. Second wave feminism, emerging in the 1960s and 1970s, broadened the focus to include reproductive rights, workplace equality, and issues of sexuality and family life. Key figures such as Betty Friedan, author of The Feminine Mystique, helped spark a national conversation about women's roles in society and the limitations imposed by traditional gender norms. By the late 20th century, third-wave feminism embraced diversity and challenged the idea of a single woman's experience, recognizing the varied and complex identities of women from different racial, cultural, and economic backgrounds. In this section, I will examine how these waves of feminism built upon one another, contributing to the ongoing evolution of the movement and influencing contemporary struggles for gender equality. Key legislation: Title IX, Equal Pay Act, and Roe v. Wade. Legal advancements have played a pivotal role in advancing women's rights in the U.S. Title IX, passed in 1972, prohibits gender discrimination in federally funded education programs, dramatically increasing opportunities for women in both academics and athletics. The Equal Pay Act of 1963 sought to eliminate wage disparities between men and women, although the gender pay gap remains an ongoing issue. Perhaps the most contentious and impactful legal decision in the history of women's rights was Roe v. Wade 1973, which affirmed a woman's right to choose to have an abortion. This decision not only expanded reproductive rights but also underscored the broader issue of bodily autonomy for women. However, the erosion of Roe in recent years has ignited a renewed debate over reproductive rights, highlighting the fragile nature of these legal victories. In this section, I will explore how these key pieces of legislation and court decisions have shaped the landscape of gender equality and consider their ongoing significance in current debates over women's rights. In summary, this module will trace the evolution of the women's rights movement from the early suffrage struggles to the more complex feminist movements of the 20th century, highlighting how legal battles and intersectional identities have shaped the fight for gender equality. By understanding these developments, we can better appreciate the ongoing challenges faced by women today in the quest for full equality. Module 7. LGBTQ Rights and Marriage Equality. Description. In this module, we explore the rich history of the LGBTQ rights movement and the monumental legal strides made toward achieving equality, particularly in marriage and protection from discrimination. By tracing the origins of LGBTQ activism through key moments like the Stonewall riots and examining the major legal victories in recent decades, I aim to provide a nuanced understanding of the progress and ongoing struggles faced by the LGBTQ community. The history of LGBTQ rights movements. The fight for LGBTQ rights has a long and often hidden history, beginning in the early 20th century when homosexuality was criminalized and LGBTQ individuals faced widespread social and legal discrimination. Early LGBTQ organizations such as the Mattachine Society and the Daughters of Bilitis laid the groundwork for later activism by providing safe spaces for LGBTQ individuals and advocating for legal reform, albeit quietly due to the oppressive social climate. The movement for LGBTQ rights gained momentum in the latter half of the 20th century as activists became more vocal in their demands for equality. However, the journey was filled with challenges, from dealing with the criminalization of same-sex relationships to enduring discrimination in employment, healthcare, and public life. This section will chart the early struggles for LGBTQ recognition and how these efforts evolved into a larger global movement for equality. Stonewall riots and the birth of LGBTQ activism. A watershed moment in LGBTQ history occurred in June 1969 with the Stonewall riots in New York City. The Stonewall Inn, a gay bar in Greenwich Village, was raided by police, as was common at the time. However, this raid sparked a series of protests and clashes between LGBTQ patrons and law enforcement that lasted for several days. The Stonewall riots are widely seen as the birth of the modern LGBTQ rights movement, marking a turning point where LGBTQ individuals began to fight openly against police brutality and institutional discrimination. In this section, I will explore how the Stonewall Uprising galvanized the LGBTQ community, leading to the formation of new activist groups like the Gay Liberation Front and the annual celebration of Pride, which continues today as a global symbol of LGBTQ visibility and resilience. Major legal milestones: Obergefell v. Hodges and Lawrence v. Texas. The struggle for legal recognition of LGBTQ rights culminated in two landmark Supreme Court decisions that fundamentally altered the status of LGBTQ individuals in the United States. The first, Lawrence v. Texas 2003, struck down sodomy laws that had criminalized consensual same-sex relationships, marking a significant victory for privacy and dignity for LGBTQ people. This decision laid the foundation for future legal battles over LGBTQ rights. The second major victory came in 2015 with Obergefell v. Hodges, in which the Supreme Court ruled that same-sex couples have the constitutional right to marry, effectively legalizing same-sex marriage across the United States. The Obergefell decision was the culmination of decades of advocacy, legal battles, and shifting public opinion, and it represented a monumental step toward full legal equality for LGBTQ individuals. In this section, I will delve into these legal milestones, discussing their impact on LGBTQ communities and their broader significance in the ongoing struggle for equality and human rights. Ongoing struggles for transgender rights and protection from discrimination. While the legalization of same-sex marriage was a critical victory, the LGBTQ rights movement is far from over. Today, one of the most pressing issues is the fight for transgender rights. Transgender individuals face discrimination in many areas of life, including healthcare, employment, housing, and education. The movement for transgender equality is particularly focused on securing legal protections against discrimination, advocating for the right to gender-affirming healthcare, and combating the high rates of violence and marginalization experienced by transgender individuals, especially transgender women of color. In recent years, transgender rights have become a political flashpoint, with numerous states proposing or enacting laws that restrict transgender individuals' access to public restrooms, healthcare, and sports participation. At the federal level, efforts to pass comprehensive non-discrimination protections such as the Equality Act remain ongoing. This section will examine the ongoing legal and social challenges faced by transgender individuals, as well as the broader fight for LGBTQ rights in a world where progress is often met with backlash. In conclusion, this module will offer a comprehensive overview of the LGBTQ rights movement, from its early struggles through the transformative moments of Stonewall and major legal victories, to the current fight for transgender equality and protection from discrimination. By understanding this history, we gain insight into the broader civil rights struggles of marginalized communities and the ongoing battle for full equality and recognition in society. Module 8. The Fight for Disability Rights. Description. In this module, I will explore the rich history of the disability rights movement, focusing on the historical treatment of people with disabilities, key figures and events that have shaped the movement, and the significant legislation that has changed the landscape of accessibility and inclusion. While the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act (ADA) marked a critical turning point, ongoing challenges in accessibility highlight the need for continued advocacy and action. Historical treatment of people with disabilities. The historical treatment of individuals with disabilities reveals a troubling narrative of marginalization and exclusion. From ancient times through the 19th century, society often viewed people with disabilities as objects of pity or as inherently flawed. They were frequently institutionalized, subjected to inhumane conditions, or entirely erased from public life. As I examine this history, I will reflect on the oppressive ideologies that have perpetuated discrimination and how these attitudes have shifted over time. In the early 20th century, eugenics movements sought to improve society by sterilizing individuals deemed unfit, often targeting those with disabilities. This dark chapter underscores the systemic barriers faced by people with disabilities and highlights the need for a movement focused on rights, dignity, and empowerment. The disability rights movement: key leaders and events. The disability rights movement emerged in the mid-20th century, fueled by the civil rights movement and a growing awareness of the injustices faced by individuals with disabilities. Activists such as Ed Roberts, often considered the father of the independent living movement, played a pivotal role in advocating for the rights of people with disabilities. Roberts and others fought for access to education, employment, and public services, leading to significant changes in societal attitudes. Key events, such as the Section 504 sit-in at the San Francisco Federal Building in 1977, were instrumental in raising awareness about disability rights and pressuring the government to enforce protections for individuals with disabilities. As I discuss these milestones, I will emphasize the collective power of grassroots activism in reshaping public policy and perception. The Americans with Disabilities Act (ADA) and its impact. The passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act (ADA) in 1990 marked a historic moment in the fight for disability rights. This comprehensive civil rights legislation prohibited discrimination against individuals with disabilities in employment, public accommodations, transportation, and telecommunications. The ADA has had a profound impact on the lives of millions of Americans, significantly improving access to jobs, buildings, and services. In this section, I will examine the key provisions of the ADA and assess its effectiveness in promoting inclusion and accessibility. While the ADA has led to substantial advancements, I will also address the limitations and challenges that have emerged since its enactment, including ongoing legal battles and the need for more robust enforcement. Modern-day accessibility and inclusion challenges. Despite the progress achieved through the ADA, significant barriers to accessibility and inclusion persist in contemporary society. Many individuals with disabilities continue to encounter challenges in accessing public spaces, healthcare, and education. Moreover, the rise of technology and digital media has introduced new accessibility concerns, as many websites and online platforms remain inadequately designed for individuals with visual, auditory, or cognitive impairments. In recent years, movements advocating for universal design and inclusive practices have gained momentum, emphasizing the need for environments and products that accommodate all individuals, regardless of ability. As I explore these modern challenges, I will highlight the importance of advocacy, education, and policy reform in promoting a more inclusive society. In conclusion, this module will provide a comprehensive overview of the fight for disability rights, tracing the historical treatment of individuals with disabilities, celebrating the achievements of the disability rights movement, and examining the ongoing challenges that demand our attention and action. By understanding this history and recognizing the need for continued advocacy, we can work towards a more inclusive society that values the contributions and rights of all individuals, regardless of their abilities. Module 9. Indigenous Rights and the Struggle for Sovereignty. Description. In this module, I will explore the multifaceted struggle for indigenous rights, focusing on the historical and contemporary challenges faced by indigenous peoples in their fight for sovereignty, land rights, and social justice. By examining the impact of colonization, the significance of the American Indian movement AIM, and contemporary movements such as Standing Rock, I aim to highlight the resilience and agency of indigenous communities in their ongoing quest for justice and recognition. Colonization and its impact on indigenous peoples. The legacy of colonization has had devastating effects on indigenous peoples, fundamentally disrupting their cultures, economies, and social structures. From the arrival of European settlers, indigenous populations face violence, displacement, and systemic efforts to erase their identities. Colonization often involved the forced removal of indigenous peoples from their ancestral lands, leading to loss of traditional knowledge and a deep-seated intergenerational trauma. As I reflect on this historical context, it becomes clear that colonization was not just a series of events but a transformative process that reshaped indigenous societies and their relationships to the land. The consequences of colonization continue to reverberate today, manifesting in economic disparities, health issues, and social injustices that indigenous communities face. Land rights, sovereignty, and treaty violations. At the heart of the indigenous struggle is the fight for land rights and sovereignty. Treaties made with indigenous nations were often violated or ignored by the federal government, leading to ongoing disputes over land and resources. The fight for recognition of land rights is not only about the physical territory but also about the cultural and spiritual connection to the land that indigenous peoples hold dear. In this section, I will delve into the legal and political frameworks surrounding indigenous sovereignty, examining landmark cases and legislation that have shaped the landscape of indigenous rights in the United States. By understanding the significance of treaties and the ongoing fight for recognition, we can appreciate the complexities of the relationship between indigenous nations and the federal government. The American Indian Movement AIM and Wounded Knee. The American Indian Movement AIM emerged in the late 1960s as a response to the systemic injustices faced by indigenous peoples. AIM sought to address issues such as poverty, police brutality, and the erosion of treaty rights through grassroots activism and direct action. One of the most significant events associated with AIM was the Wounded Knee incident in 1973, where activists occupied the town of Wounded Knee, South Dakota, to draw attention to the injustices faced by indigenous peoples. In this section, I will examine the impact of AIM on indigenous activism and the broader civil rights movement, highlighting key figures and events that have shaped the movement's trajectory. The Wounded Knee occupation not only brought national attention to indigenous issues, but also symbolized a resurgence of indigenous identity and activism. This contemporary indigenous movement, Standing Rock, and environmental justice. In recent years, indigenous movements have gained renewed attention, particularly in the fight for environmental justice. The Standing Rock Sioux Tribe's resistance against the Dakota Access Pipeline in 2016 exemplifies the intersection of indigenous rights and environmental advocacy. The protests at Standing Rock mobilized a diverse coalition of indigenous and non-indigenous activists, drawing international attention to issues of land sovereignty, environmental protection, and the need for responsible resource management. As I explore contemporary indigenous movements, I will highlight the importance of environmental justice in the broader context of indigenous rights. The struggle for clean water, land protection, and sustainable practices is deeply intertwined with the fight for sovereignty, as indigenous peoples advocate for their rights to protect their lands and resources for future generations. In conclusion, this module will provide a comprehensive overview of indigenous rights and the struggle for sovereignty, tracing the historical impacts of colonization, the significance of activism through AIM, and the ongoing challenges and victories in contemporary movements. By understanding the complexities of these issues, we can appreciate the resilience of indigenous communities and the importance of their voices in the ongoing pursuit of justice and recognition. Module 1010. Immigrant Rights and the Fight Against Discrimination. Description. In this module, I will explore the complex landscape of immigrant rights and the ongoing fight against discrimination. Immigrants have played a crucial role in shaping the United States, yet their journeys have been marked by systemic barriers and prejudice. By examining historical immigration policies, the influence of the civil rights movement, contemporary issues such as DACA and the plight of dreamers, and the rise of xenophobia, I aim to illuminate the challenges and triumphs in the pursuit of immigrant rights. Historical immigration policies and exclusion acts. The history of immigration policies in the United States reveals a pattern of exclusion and discrimination, particularly against specific racial and ethnic groups. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 is a poignant example of this. It was the first significant law in U.S. history that restricted immigration based on nationality, targeting Chinese laborers amid growing anti-Chinese sentiment. This act not only reflected deep-seated racism, but also established a precedent for future exclusionary policies. As I delve into this topic, I will reflect on how these historical policies have shaped the immigrant experience in the U.S. The implementation of quotas and discriminatory laws aimed at various groups created a hostile environment for many immigrants. By examining other significant acts, such as the Immigration Act of 1924, which favored Northern European immigrants, I will demonstrate how these policies reinforced racial hierarchies and contributed to the marginalization of non-white immigrants. The Civil Rights Movement's influence on immigrant rights. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s played a pivotal role in advocating for social justice and equality, setting a foundation for subsequent movements for immigrant rights. The struggles faced by African Americans against segregation and discrimination resonated with immigrant communities, inspiring them to demand their rights. Landmark legislation, such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964, not only sought to eliminate racial discrimination but also laid the groundwork for challenging discriminatory immigration policies. In this section, I will highlight key figures and events from the civil rights movement that had a profound impact on immigrant rights. The alliance between civil rights activists and immigrant communities was instrumental in fostering solidarity and raising awareness about the injustices faced by immigrants. As I analyze these connections, it becomes evident that the fight for racial equality is inextricably linked to the fight for immigrant rights. DACA, Dreamers, and the fight for immigration reform. The Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals DACA program, implemented in 2012, represents a significant milestone in the fight for immigrant rights, particularly for young people who arrived in the U.S. as children. DACA allows eligible undocumented immigrants, often referred to as dreamers, to apply for temporary relief from deportation and work authorization. However, the program's future has been fraught with legal challenges and political uncertainty. As I explore the stories of dreamers, I will underscore the profound impact of DACA on their lives and aspirations. Many dreamers have become integral members of their communities, contributing to the economy and society. However, the ongoing fight for comprehensive immigration reform remains critical, as DACA does not provide a path to permanent residency. I will examine the broader implications of immigration reform, including proposals and political debates that seek to address the status of millions of undocumented immigrants in the U.S. Xenophobia and discrimination against immigrants today. Despite the contributions of immigrants to American society, xenophobia and discrimination remain pervasive issues. The rise of anti-immigrant sentiment, often fueled by political rhetoric and media portrayals, has resulted in increased violence and hostility towards immigrant communities. This section will explore the current climate of fear and prejudice faced by immigrants, including hate crimes and discriminatory policies. I will also analyze the psychological impact of xenophobia on immigrant communities, particularly among vulnerable populations such as refugees and asylum seekers. As I reflect on contemporary challenges, I will emphasize the importance of empathy, understanding, and advocacy in combating discrimination and fostering a more inclusive society. In conclusion, this module provides a comprehensive overview of immigrant rights and the fight against discrimination, tracing the historical roots of exclusionary policies, the influence of the civil rights movement, the significance of DACA and Dreamers, and the ongoing struggles against xenophobia. By understanding the complexities of these issues, we can recognize the resilience of immigrant communities and the critical need for advocacy and reform in the pursuit of justice and equality. Through education and awareness, we can work towards a society that values and respects the contributions of all individuals, regardless of their immigration status. Module 1.1. Global Civil Rights Movements. Description. In this module, I will delve into the rich tapestry of global civil rights movements, exploring the struggles for equality and justice that have shaped societies across the world. Civil rights movements are not confined to the borders of any one nation. They resonate universally, driven by the common human desire for dignity, freedom, and recognition. Through examining pivotal movements, influential leaders, and international legal frameworks, I aim to illustrate how these global struggles have informed and influenced civil rights movements, including those in the United States. Civil rights movements around the world. Across the globe, civil rights movements have emerged as powerful forces challenging oppressive systems and advocating for marginalized communities. In South Africa, the fight against apartheid, a system of institutionalized racial segregation, mobilized millions and drew international attention. Leaders like Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu became icons of resistance, advocating for equal rights and social justice. The struggle culminated in the dismantling of apartheid in the early 1990s, leading to the election of Mandela as the country's first black president. In India, the caste system has historically oppressed millions, particularly Dalits, formerly known as untouchables. The work of Mahatma Gandhi, who championed nonviolent resistance and social equality, laid the foundation for India's independence from British colonial rule and the subsequent fight against caste-based discrimination. As I explore these movements, I will highlight how local contexts and historical legacies have shaped the specific challenges and triumphs of these struggles. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights and International Law. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR, adopted by the United Nations in 1948, represents a milestone in the global pursuit of civil rights. It establishes fundamental human rights that should be universally protected, serving as a moral compass for nations worldwide. The UDHR's principles resonate with various civil rights movements, providing a framework for advocacy and legal challenges. In this section, I will reflect on how the UDHR has influenced national constitutions and legal systems, inspiring activists and organizations to hold governments accountable for human rights violations. By examining its impact, I will demonstrate the importance of international law in the fight for civil rights and social justice across the globe. Global leaders Nelson Mandela and Mahatma Gandhi. The legacies of global leaders like Nelson Mandela and Mahatma Gandhi are profound and enduring. Mandela's journey from prisoner to president symbolizes the triumph of the human spirit over oppression. His emphasis on reconciliation and nation-building set a standard for post-apartheid South Africa and inspired movements worldwide. Similarly, Gandhi's philosophy of satyagraha, or nonviolent resistance, has influenced countless civil rights activists, including those in the U.S. During the civil rights movement, figures like Martin Luther King Jr. drew from Gandhi's teachings, demonstrating the power of peaceful protest and challenging systemic injustice. In this section, I will analyze how the teachings and actions of these leaders continue to inspire contemporary movements and shape discussions around civil rights. The impact of global civil rights struggles on the U.S. The interconnectedness of global civil rights movements is evident in the way struggles for justice in one part of the world can influence and inspire movements elsewhere. The civil rights movement in the United States, for instance, drew significant inspiration from global struggles against colonialism and racial oppression. The solidarity demonstrated by African American leaders with anti-colonial movements in Africa and Asia underscores the universal nature of the fight for human rights. As I explore the impact of global civil rights struggles on the U.S., I will highlight key moments of solidarity, such as the role of the U.S. in the anti-apartheid movement and the influence of global protests on American activists. The dialogues between movements have led to shared strategies, goals, and frameworks for advocacy, emphasizing that the fight for justice is a collective endeavor transcending national borders. Conclusion. In conclusion, this module provides a comprehensive overview of global civil rights movements, examining their historical context, influential leaders, and the role of international frameworks like the UDHR. By understanding the interconnectedness of these movements, we can appreciate the shared struggles for dignity, equality, and justice that unite people worldwide. The lessons learned from these movements not only enrich our understanding of civil rights, but also remind us of the ongoing responsibility to advocate for the rights of all individuals, regardless of their geographic location. Through this exploration, I hope to inspire a deeper appreciation for the global dimensions of civil rights and the need for solidarity in the fight against oppression. Module 1.2. Civil Rights in the 21st Century. Description. In this module, I will explore the evolving landscape of civil rights in the 21st century, focusing on contemporary movements, the impact of technology, and the ongoing struggles for equality and justice. As we navigate a world marked by systemic racism, political polarization, and climate change, it is crucial to understand how these challenges intersect with civil rights and how we can effectively engage in advocacy efforts. The Black Lives Matter movement and systemic racism. The Black Lives Matter (BLM) movement emerged in response to the alarming rates of violence against Black individuals, particularly by law enforcement. Founded in 2013, BLM seeks to raise awareness about systemic racism and advocate for policy changes to address injustices faced by Black communities. The movement gained international prominence following high-profile cases of police brutality, such as the murders of Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, and George Floyd. As I delve into the origins and evolution of BLM, I will reflect on the significance of its demands, including calls for police accountability, criminal justice reform, and the dismantling of systemic racism. The movement not only highlights the urgent need for change within law enforcement, but also addresses broader issues of racial inequality, economic disparity, and social justice. By examining BLM's impact on public discourse and policy, I aim to illustrate the continuing relevance of civil rights advocacy in today's society. The role of social media in civil rights activism. In the digital age, social media has become a powerful tool for civil rights activism. Platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook enable activists to mobilize support, raise awareness, and share information in real time. The hashtag Black Lives Matter serves as a rallying cry, connecting individuals and communities globally in solidarity against racial injustice. In this section, I will analyze how social media has transformed the landscape of activism, allowing marginalized voices to be heard and amplifying grassroots movements. Social media campaigns have played a crucial role in organizing protests, sharing educational resources, and fostering community engagement. However, I will also address the challenges of misinformation, online harassment, and the commodification of activism that accompany the use of these platforms. Understanding both the potential and pitfalls of social media is essential for effective engagement in contemporary civil rights work. New challenges: police reform, voting rights restrictions, climate justice. As we confront the realities of the 21st century, new challenges have emerged that intersect with civil rights issues. Police reform has become a pressing concern, with calls for comprehensive changes to law enforcement practices, including the reallocation of funds towards community resources, mental health services, and violence prevention initiatives. Additionally, voting rights restrictions threaten to disenfranchise marginalized communities, echoing historical struggles against voter suppression. Legislative efforts aimed at curtailing access to the ballot box disproportionately affect people of color and low-income individuals, raising alarms about the erosion of democratic principles. Finally, the impact of climate change presents a new frontier in civil rights advocacy. Environmental justice highlights how marginalized communities are often the most affected by environmental degradation and climate-related disasters. As I explore these challenges, I will emphasize the importance of intersectionality in civil rights work, recognizing that the fight for justice encompasses a wide array of issues affecting diverse communities. How to engage in modern civil rights work. Engaging in modern civil rights work requires a multifaceted approach that combines advocacy, education, and community involvement. I will provide practical strategies for individuals seeking to contribute to the movement, including 1. Educating oneself and others. Understanding the history and current dynamics of civil rights issues is crucial. I encourage everyone to read books, attend workshops, and participate in discussions that deepen their understanding of systemic injustices. 2. Supporting grassroots organizations. Contributing time, resources, or financial support to organizations that are actively working towards civil rights and social justice can amplify collective efforts. 3. Advocating for policy change. Engaging with local and national representatives, participating in campaigns, and advocating for legislative reforms can drive systemic change. 4. Using social media responsibly. Leveraging social media to raise awareness, share credible information, and amplify marginalized voices can help build community and foster activism. 5. Participating in protests and actions. Joining peaceful demonstrations and community organizing efforts can bring visibility to critical issues and show solidarity with those affected by injustices. Conclusion. In conclusion, this module emphasizes the importance of understanding civil rights in the 21st century as a dynamic and evolving landscape. The Black Lives Matter movement, the role of social media, and new challenges such as police reform and climate justice highlight the ongoing relevance of civil rights advocacy. By engaging thoughtfully and actively, we can contribute to a more just and equitable society for all.